month. We will go ahead and look at our minutes from last month and approve them if there are no other questions or concerns.
I believe the chair's waiting for a motion.
I move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I second.
Okay. Heather?
Absolutely. Sabula,
I will abstain because I was not present last month.
Lyra,
Aye, present, yes.
Robinson,
Yes, aye.
Roberts,
Yes.
Smith.
I abstained because I wasn't present.
Hess, Geyer,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye. Okay, I think we can move on. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Manning, Mr. Chevalier, and Mr. Grignan to present on Chief Oshkosh. So we have about 35 minutes for the presentation and discussion. I'm going to ask that the rest of us maybe mute our mics while they're presenting, just to reduce some background noise, including I myself will mute mine as well. So Dr. Manning, please go ahead.
Thank you, Angie. Ms. Lee, sorry. So before I introduce myself and before I start talking, because I'm going to speak for a few minutes to sort of frame the project and talk about what we've done so far and what we're hoping to see. Before I do that, though, I'd like to give Dave Grignon and Arnold Chevalier the chance to introduce themselves a little bit more fully. So perhaps we could start with Dave Grignon.
My name is David Greeno. The Menominee name is Naokwa, which means when the sun is at mid-sky. And I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Menominee tribe.
Thank you, Dave. Arnold Chevalier, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to come and answer any questions you guys have about the project that we've been working on for so long. I presently reside in the Menominee Indian Reservation. My Menominee name is Osawa Namaki, and it has to do with the colors and the lightning. And I look forward to any and all of your questions regarding our project here. Thank you.
Thank you both. And so I'm going to speak for a few minutes together, and then I'm hoping that we'll hear from Dave and Arnold a lot in the discussion of the project. But I'll frame it now. We can move on to the next slide, I guess. I don't have control of the slide, so I'm going to intervene with that. So I'm Dr. Pascal Manning. I'm an assistant professor of English at UW Oshkosh. My expertise is in Indigenous studies, as well as 19th century literature and science. The project that I'm going to talk to you about today has been in the works for a number of years. I've been involved since the fall of 2018, but actually the project predates my involvement. I come to this project because of my scholarly background and as a member of the university and academic community, but it's important for me to communicate right away that I am not Indigenous. I don't seek to speak or speak on behalf of the Menominee or other Indigenous peoples of this region or to represent them. I'm really here as a concerned citizen to communicate an opportunity by which the city of Oshkosh and its citizens can become better neighbors with the Indigenous communities that long predate settlement and that continue here today. To borrow the words of Geith Tonamuk of the Mashpee Wampanoag, I'm here to talk about one way to effect the move from the role of occupier to the role of neighbor with legitimacy. Dave, Arnold, and I are the remaining members of an ad hoc committee formed around 2018 by former Mayor Steve Cummings to add informational plaques to the existing Chief Oshkosh monument in Menomonee Park. And I'm happy to talk about that committee and its membership in the Q&A if there are questions. In 2018, I was tasked with researching and writing the language for the project. And once I had a draft, I collaborated with Dave Grignon, who generously brought his knowledge of Chief Oshkosh and Menominee history to bear on the draft. Arnold Chevalier has been invaluable in his capacity as both a consultant and a coordinator. The three of us have kept on with this project in recognition of how important it is. If we could switch to the next slide. Oh, I think this is an old file, so I'm not sure. This is not the file I most recently sent. So unfortunately, it's not quite right. Do you have the file, Michelle, or does someone have the file?
Courtney is going back to emails right now to make sure we have the correct one.
Okay.
Just want to click through.
There it is.
There we go.
Thank you. Sorry. It was going to be too confusing to try to figure out which page to go to. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief and outline what brings us to you today more specifically. We are proposing to add 5 educational plaques around the existing Chief Oshkosh monument. These plaques are designed to do at least 2 things. First, their goal is to teach visitors about a chief of the Menominee whose tenure as chief spanned the years that saw the formalization of federal laws for Indian removal, the ratification of Wisconsin's statehood, and the ultimate displacement of the Menominee onto reservation lands. Their second goal is to create an opportunity for this city to embrace a public dialogue with its own history. The spirit of dialogue is central to this project. This is why we propose to add to the monument rather than to take anything away. We've constructed plaques that will inform visitors, provoke questions, and enact forms of exchange and interchange that are part of the long and difficult process of reconciliation. If we can move to the next slide. We come to this project because of both the statue, which was designed and installed in 1911, and the plaque added in 1926 that make up the monument to Chief Oshkosh in Menomonee Park. On the left of the slide there, you can see the text, which reads on the plaque, Oshkosh, a chief of the Menominee tribe of Indians, whose greatest achievement in this life was in giving to this city the name which will make it famous, while one stone remains upon another. With its focus on the city, without any mention of the displacements and dispossessions that were enforced on Indigenous populations to make this city possible in the first place. It participates in a long-standing process of erasure, making settler encroachment and Indigenous land cession seem natural and even heroic. In limiting Chief Oshkosh's legacy to lending his name to this city, the plaque participates in a history of devaluing and delegitimizing Indigenous peoples by subordinating them and their long history on the land to the interests of settlement. In addition, the statue presents a generic, romanticized image of a stoic warrior, rather than seeking to remember Oshkosh the person in particular. And we can move to the next slide, in which I have images that I'm placing in dialogue with this statue. The figure in the statue to Chief Oshkosh looks nothing like the person the statue purports to represent. It traffics in a reductive representation or a representational trend that limits its subject to a set of stereotypes and their associations, which together risk pegging him, as many other such representations of the period did, as belonging to a remote and romanticized pre-contact era. As such, the statue embodies the violence of romanticization and expresses a message of settler supremacy. If we could move to the next slide. So this is an image of what we're proposing for the site. And I've sort of done my best with, the limited tools at my disposal with PowerPoint to sort of paint a picture of what we imagine going up around the existing monument. The text of the plaques aims, as I've said, to dialogue with the existing monument in a corrective and informative way that we hope could put the city of Oshkosh on the map in a region full of such monuments. As a community willing to confront its own complex history in the spirit of restitution and reconciliation. Now, I know that you've all had a chance to look at the language we've proposed for the plaques. So I'll just outline our rationale in brief by way of conclusion, and we can move on to any specifics you'd like us to discuss in the question period. There's always lots more we can say, but I've aimed to keep my comments really brief here in order to make a lot of room for conversation. So plaques 1, 2, and 3 paint a more nuanced picture of Oshkosh's legacy, offering key biographical details and exploring his role as a statesman and as a land steward. Plaque 4 reflects more broadly on this region and the Menominee peoples. Finally, Plaque 5, which we call our meta plaque, meta being from the Greek meaning above or about, is a plaque about plaques, really. It reflects directly on the monument itself, taking stock of the forms of underrepresentation and misrepresentation that we can detect in the existing monument to Chief Oshkosh. Each of these plaques is designed to be able to stand alone. We recognize that passersby will not always read the entire installation. And we recognize that visitors will range in age and education. Our goal has been to produce clear, detailed language and sometimes to repeat salient details in recognition of how monuments are visited. But it has also been our goal never to lose sight of opportunities to effect a decolonizing dialogue with the monument and the wider histories, ideas, and problems that it represents. So I have, as part of the slides, the language that we have presented to you. The slide that's up currently is one of the 2 existing representations for Oshkosh. This was painted in 1888. So one of the things that we have proposed, for instance, is the incorporation of Oshkosh's, an actual representation of Chief Oshkosh on that 5th plaque, the meta plaque. And so I put in my slides 2 images of Oshkosh, the photograph that was taken during his life and the painting that was produced posthumously in the slides to give you a visual of what we might imagine incorporating into plaque number 5, which is described a little bit in slide number 6. But the final few slides include the language for the plaques that we've drafted, which we're happy to talk about. The slide that's up currently, it just shows you the kinds of plaques that we have in mind. These are taken from kind of around the country, and they represent plaques that incorporate the kind of length of text that we're talking about with our projects. We wanted to give you a visual of the basic design that we envision for the project. But I think I'd like to turn things over to the committee to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Manning, and thank you, Mr. Chevalier and Grignon. I've long awaited to see this presentation, and I'll just start by saying, my grandson lives here in Oshkosh, and he's both Menominee and Ojibwa, Elin Weasel, and his grandmother Turtleette. I know before she passed, we had a conversation along these lines, not specifically regarding this particular statue, but I'm very honored that we're having this conversation. A question that comes to mind is to Mr. Chevalier and Mr. Grignon, does this represent your story? Because this is not our story, this is your story. We can only share the space on the story. And I just wanted to make sure that I understand, that there was opportunity for, those contributions.
I'd like to answer that. Yes, we did meet, and first we met with the city council. We had them here on the reservation, and we had a couple of meetings after that. And I did write a lot of what is written on these plaques, and a lot of that is true history of the Menominee people. And what we wanted to do is present a true history of our tribe. Chief Oshkosh did a lot for our people. And I think one thing that's not on here is, but maybe it is if it wasn't for him, we'd be in Minnesota. But he and other chiefs made it so that we could stay in our ancestral territory here in Wisconsin. And I think these plaques represent the honor that we should bestow on Chief Oshkosh, and to put a true photograph or painting of him with the plaques should be done. Statue itself is a romanticized depiction of the Wild West, or how Native people looked, as described by whoever. But we can try to fix that by presenting a true history of the Menominee people and of Oshkosh, and not saying that his only contribution was to lend his name to the city, but to describe the Menominee people in the area of Oshkosh and of northeastern Wisconsin. That's what we were trying to do.
Are you done, Aqua?
Yep.
So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my involvement in this project. I was contacted by the former mayor and asked if I would be willing to get involved in, his words, not mine, cleaning up the park itself. And he said it had been eroded over the years and they wanted to do something about that and perhaps say a few words. And I told the mayor then, and I feel very strong today about the language that or the amount of verbiage that it would take one to tell the story, the historic story of the Menominee people would take more than what the mayor was proposing back when we started. He had suggested that perhaps a paragraph would do. And I informed the mayor that he perhaps should find some other project to work on because you could not tell the Menominee story in one paragraph. Menominees have been here for thousands and thousands of years, and they deserve more than one paragraph. And certainly Chief Oshkosh for what he had did for his own people and keeping us here in the northeastern part of Wisconsin deserves more than one paragraph. The romanticization of not only the Menominee people, but all indigenous people has to be addressed. And we are not advocating at all the removal of any part of this park or the statue or any of the verbiage that's already there. In fact, the plaques that we are proposing would add to the history that we have shared with the European ever since their arrival, and it shows the contrast of what was romanticized and what was, some people call it, Hollywood. You're romanticizing with the Europeans about what they thought of us as noble savage. So the language, and I really need to thank Pasquale for her involvement and the research of all of this. And this is accurate history with respect to Chief Oshkosh and the Menominee people. I'm proud to be a part of this, and I'd hope that the folks in Oshkosh would see that that this is a great opportunity for both of us to acknowledge each other's existence and to know that we understand that nobody's going back to Europe and we're not going back to the wigwam, and but we do need to live together and move forward. I personally thank the city of Oshkosh and the former mayor for getting this project started. I do think that we would go a long way in public relations area, both with both communities, and it would be a good thing to celebrate. I've also been involved with the university when they did their land acknowledgement statement, and once again, I think it's an opportunity for all of us to have dialogue and to acknowledge the history of this land. So if anybody has any questions, we'd be more than happy to address them at this point in time. Thank you.
I have, sorry, I have a question. So my name is Moshe. Thank you very much for both of you for coming in and also for putting out this history, for bringing this history to us. Some of this history, I'm sure there are so many people who may not be aware of the true history. Now, the question that I have for the two gentlemen is almost related to my own background, where I come from. I come from Southern Africa. At one point, the Europeans also came and took over our land. And in many instances, the true history has been distorted. It's not true history that we have. But when we sit down with elders like you, we come to learn the truth, the history. Now, I know many years have passed to where we are right now, but I keep hearing the romanticization of Chief Oshkosh, according to Europeans. That includes the statue that we have. It's all Hollywood, like we try to put it. My question is it not right, as we are putting the record straight now, moving forward, to do the right thing if we have the correct image? Because it's not all about money. If we have the correct photograph, the correct pictures that were drawn at that particular time, why not do it? Because I think history preservation is more than money. If the money is there, we should do the right things now. I heard you saying you are not advocating for it as a nation or as a tribe, but I think we owe this to ourselves to put the record straight, because if we don't do it now, then we are accepting this Hollywood romantics for the future, just like we've heard about so many other historical facts.
I think that, I think it is the right thing to do to present the correct history of the Menominee Nation, Menominee tribe. And in doing so, putting the correct, because you're trying to present Chief Oshkosh, and the way it is now, that's no way represents him at all. I think there's a plaque there and put a few words, and you can't say it in just a paragraph. You have to tell history about the Menominee tribe being here for thousands of years, living in northeastern Wisconsin, central Wisconsin. Menominees lived in a vast territory, over 10 million acres, and that was taken away from us through the treaties. We didn't really have a choice in the matter, but chiefs like Oshkosh and others of the Menominee tribe made it so that we could stay here, while other tribes had to move on. And the shrewdness of Oshkosh, speaking his own language to an interpreter, conveying this message to President Fillmore at the time, saying that he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to leave what was now Wisconsin. He said there's a wilderness area on the Wolf River. Let me move my people there. And after a few years, 1852, President Fillmore said, "Oh, okay, move your people up there, and I'll decide if your people can stay there." And then 2 years later, 1854, the Menominee Reservation was established. But in the writings that we did on these 4 or 5 plaques, I think represents the true history of our tribe. And we're trying to send a message to not only the people of Oshkosh, but of Wisconsin and whoever else may visit this. They'll know this is, oh wow, you know, the Menominee people are still here. And this is the man, this is the, we're honoring this chief who made it so, along with other chiefs, that we could stay here. And I want to emphasize that staying here because other tribes had to move on. Yet the Menominees were still living in their ancestral territory today. I think it's right that we should go ahead with these plaques, put an accurate picture of Oshkosh there and let the people know that we're still here.
I would like to add to what my brother Nakwa had just said. I believe that this is a learning moment, that you folks in Oshkosh and us, we can work together on making it a true learning moment by not taking down that statue. I think it stands in stark contrast of what the 2 photos that Pasquale had presented in her presentation here. If we choose one of those or both of those drawings or paintings of Chief Oshkosh, it's obvious that the statue does not represent the figure of Chief Oshkosh. I mean, he was in quite smaller than the statue that's there. But to the point that it's a learning moment and it's in stark contrast of who he was as a human being, and to show people today that how the romanticization, the Hollywood mentality, if you will, that persisted and still persists throughout this whole country. If we can show the people who go to this park and look at this statue and read the plaques, they will then start asking questions. Why is that figure so different than the photo that we're looking at? And then they come to understand that the whole thought process of what Europeans, you know, how they romanticized with the so-called noble savage. So I think it's a learning moment, and I think we would miss the boat if we advocated tearing down that statue instead of tearing it down. Let's use it as a teaching moment so that people can see the contrast from what the mentality was back then and what it is today. And I think by having one or both of these photos of Chief Oshkosh on the plaque, it would draw those questions from everybody that looks at it. Thank you.
If it's okay, I'll just add my voice to this. I know the question wasn't directed at me, but we've said that we're not advocating to change the monument, but I think we feel strongly that we shouldn't change the monument. I think that's one of the things that you know, both Dave and Arnold are saying here, is that we don't want to erase these histories of misrepresentation and misunderstanding. We want to make people aware of them. And we want to do that as part of a wider process of decolonization.
This is Beth, and I just wanted to say that I love the idea of keeping the statue, and whatever it takes to add the plaques would be awesome. One comment about the draft verbiage for the plaques is, you know, we try and think about an 8th grade reading level when we're publishing things, and though these aren't being published, my suggestion would be that the verbiage should be looked at to be at a little bit of an more understandable level for people who aren't as high when it comes to literacy. Just a thought.
That's very helpful, and that was a lot of the process that we went through. You know, I wrote these, and then I brought them to Dave and Arnold and others, and they were really transformed. They were changed because we were trying to account for different kinds of audiences, and you know, Dave brought knowledges that I didn't have in key ways, especially in the land plaque, and we're happy to talk about changing this further and transforming it and making it suitable.
It's great information.
We can turn off the slides, by the way. I don't know if we need them.
And if I may ask, and you know, I am appreciative to the former Mayor Cummings, and I believe Shirley Brabinder Maddox from the Landmarks Commission and some of the original committee members for starting this conversation. Sometimes they're not comfortable, but I find this exciting. And one of the things I wanted to ask is, I think I heard somewhere from some of the people that I spoke with that there was a potential proposition of the plaques being mounted on perhaps boulders that would come from Kashina or from the Menominee land. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I also am curious as to when those conversations were had previously, what was the promise or what was the expectation of next steps beyond adopting language with the plaques?
If I could, Pasquale, just for a moment, you know, all through this process, it's always been in the back of my mind, and I suspect everybody's, including the former mayor, of where we're going to get to wherewithal to do this. I think that the boulders you were referring to, I have not heard that, but it may very well have been discussed in other circles, but I don't foresee, I mean, once again, it's where we're going to get the money to do this. And if we got the money, I say, yes, let's do it. I mean, let's do it right. Pascal, you might have more information about the boulder question.
Yeah, so it's in its earliest form, when it was formed as an ad hoc committee, the main membership was Steve Cummings, Shirley Maddox, myself, Dennis Zach. Dennis and I were coming from the university, and then there were other consultants who came in from the Department of Anthropology at the university, and we had a liaison at the city that was Stephen Wiley. And at an early meeting in 2018, we talked about once, you know, as a result of some conversations, I made a proposal about how it could look. And I think it was Shirley who suggested that we might be able to put this on stones. And she was basing this on prior projects that had done similar kinds of things. And we talked about the fact that there's quite a bit of language and the stones would have to be really rather quite large. And so we sort of landed on the traditional plaques in bronze, because we felt that they would be more workable in terms of space. But it never in my involvement was this brought to the tribe as a formal proposal. I do think that Shirley had this idea to put it on the stones, and it may be that there were conversations going on that I wasn't privy to. But our generalized proposal was stakes and flat boards with text on them, because we thought that was the most viable. But I'm in no way against boulders. They just have to be really big.
Right.
Hi, my name is Joaquin Lira, and I just wanted to say that I think the keeping the statue is really a brilliant idea, because it's really a contrast with the history, as someone has mentioned. It's putting up a mirror to the misguided history that they were trying to portray, regardless of the intent. I'm not sure what that was, but I think it's really a good idea to have both as a contrast. And I also agree with Beth. We sometimes tend to complicate these histories, and I think it needs to be as simple as possible for people to just see that. And the last thing I say, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, but I think, when we talk about uncomfortable conversations, it might be uncomfortable for some, but not for others. I think when you're doing the right thing, it should not be an uncomfortable conversation. It should just be the right conversation, is when we tiptoe around these things that, we start to shortchange ourselves as to what we need to do. And I think we need to be honest and see and move forward and do what we need to do, which is the right thing.
Important point.
I'd like to ask something. I'm wondering if I can be so direct, like what barriers are you facing from moving forward with this project? So, Mr. Chevalier, you said money. That's a very real, barrier. What other barriers are you facing from moving on with this project?
I hope I'm not over speaking here, but I believe that these plaques have gotten the approval via Mr. Greeno of the tribal government, the Menominee tribal government. So that's already been settled. I think the only thing left is the city of Oshkosh, the powers that be there, and of course the money is a big issue. But I've always thought that if we can move forward all together, I can't see that the money would stop us at this juncture. We would find it somehow, and I would be more than happy to get involved in the raising of whatever we need, whether we're getting big, huge boulders from the reservation. I'm sure the tribe would be willing to participate in making sure they were from the reservation. But I don't know if there are any other barriers other than the city council and its approval.
No, not from my perspective. There have been barriers in the past. This project was effectively stalled a little over a year ago, and the three of us being here sort of is testament to this kind of ongoing sense of urgency that this is really important and really valuable. I think the barriers are behind us, and we're very keen to collaborate to make this work. And I'm sort of thinking about the things that are coming up, and one of the things that has been mentioned is the boulders. We have one plaque that's that's quite short, and that meta plaque that's reflecting on the monument. So there might be ways of doing an installation that takes different forms. For instance, putting the shorter language on something, I think it would be quite nice and symbolic to put the language that meditates on the representation of Oshkosh upon a boulder that is derived from the Menominee land. But I think from our perspective, we're eager to forge ahead.
Do you have any idea what the estimate is to have the plaques done?
I tried on many occasions to get a clear estimate, and I'm not trying to suggest that there were any intentional barriers put up against that. My sense from conversations that I've had with Stephen Wiley, who is basing some estimates on things that have been done in the past, is that we might be talking about $5,000 per plaque, could be more. I haven't been able to get a clear estimate, but that was always part of the original conversation. So the city has people that it's contracted with in the past for plaques of this nature. And I think that we'd be talking about $5,000 per plaque or more.
Do you consider, not that it's really not my business, but if you could fundraise, because I do think people would be happy to contribute. If you could fundraise, say 10,000, would you consider putting up 2 at that point and then continuing to work toward the others?
Well, what you may not know is that there is a fund of $5,000 already. This was given to the city when Steve Cummings was mayor. So somewhere there is an amount of 5,000 which we could build on. But and I'm not opposed to fundraising. I do put in grants for my own work, and I could look at possibilities, and I have looked at possibilities. I've spoken to some people at the university to see if there was interest in investment. We're not opposed to doing this piecemeal. I think it would be a little bit of a shame not to sort of put the whole sort of complex dialogue in place, because the plaques are standalone. They do work by themselves, but they work a lot better conceptually if they're all talking to each other. We'd like to see them all together, but this has been a long time coming. We're willing to take a little while longer to make it work properly.
I had a question on the funding of this project. Maybe I should ask this to the mayor. I think, can the city fund this? Because this is a park. We are talking about this is in the park, and it's in the interest of all of us.
So I'm glad you asked that question, Moshe, because I believe that this committee could bring at a future meeting a resolution recommending to the council and I want to say the perhaps the Parks Advisory Board and the Library Board, because they are responsible for the administration of the maintenance fund for the statues. But in any event, this committee can make a resolution at the next meeting if they wanted to vote to recommend something to council or the other committees. But I also think, it would be maybe somewhat ambitious, but I know that the Menominee powwow is taking place this summer. It's still on the schedule, right, for June 5th?
Oh, they're talking about it. It's not official yet.
There may be some opportunities for, recommending of funding or fundraising, friend raising and fundraising. So certainly this committee has the ability to make some recommendations.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Hi, this is John. I'm sorry my video isn't working tonight, but I think I have some ideas that might be able to augment your thoughts if you don't mind me jumping in. So I think everything that's been presented, me personally, I think it's great. And just in terms of the process of the city and how it might best be received with these ideas, I agree with the mayor. I think certainly the DEI group could bring this information to the city manager and or the mayor. But she's right. There are several different groups that I think if this presentation hasn't been given to them, I think it would make the acceptance of this project and create more momentum by sharing this information with those other groups. So just as a suggestion, if you haven't presented to, as the mayor said, the Parks Advisory Board and the Library Board, because they have a special place, as the mayor mentioned, in regard to monuments, and also the Landmarks Commission, I would add that group. If you could provide the same presentation that you gave to this group to those other bodies, then what I think we could do is we could, and if they're interested in moving this forward, what I think we could do is then bring the support of all those three groups to the city manager, and we could talk to him about potential funding options. Then we could place it on the agenda and be prepared to answer any questions the council might have about initiating the project, supporting the project, preserving the project. So those are just some thoughts. There certainly don't have to, take that track, but in terms of my knowledge of the of the parties that may want to be involved, and the idea that I think the project would be stronger with the support of those additional groups. That would be my suggestion for your consideration.
And John, thanks for bringing that up. And, you know, it just occurred to me as we were listing off those different committees that could touch on this. There's an opportunity for making a recommendation that we have a joint workshop for all of those to come together and receive the presentation to, you know, have this workshopped in, you know, that's just another way of doing it.
Yes, that would be another way.
Well, I think I can say that we're willing to participate in a joint workshop, to give the presentation again, to collaborate in the ways that will make this work. We'll make the time. I'll speak for myself, but I don't want to speak on behalf of Dave and Arnold.
I pledge my support. I've been here for the long haul, and I will remain here until I see it come to fruition. So I pledge my support to meet with any and all people that might help us to that end result. So
Yes,
I think
I too will be ready to do whatever to get this project through, and I'll be there.
That sounds great, and I would just add too, I happen to have a department head meeting with the other departments on Wednesday. City Manager Roloff has a meeting with all the department heads on Wednesday, and those departments have liaisons to all those groups that we talked about. So I think, you know, I certainly would be happy to bring this idea to the department head meeting and say, hey, what do you think about a joint meeting, as Mayor Paul Mary said? Or, you know, how do you think each one of your groups would receive this? You know, what would be the best way for us to proceed in order to be successful in terms of all the work that you put forth on this project? So I'd be certainly happy to bring that forward on Wednesday. And then, you know, we can communicate back to you through Michelle, if that's acceptable to the group. But I'd be happy to do that if you think that would be helpful.
And I would urge that, you know, that time be considered here. So much time and too much time has passed for us to get to this point. John, I just, you know, this is me speaking individually, that that this be promptly scheduled.
Understood.
Could we make a recommendation on this from this committee so that there's one less barrier and we get this done and we recommend move forward? I mean, instead of having to come back after listening to anybody else, I just think that the more we can do to help move this along, the better. And I think most of us will be ready to do that.
Yes, and we certainly can have a special meeting to put that on the agenda for a vote if the committee would, you know, so choose. This committee.
I will go ahead and make a motion to put this on a special meeting for a vote for our committee. I want to get the wording right here, but I'd like to make the recommendation that the DEI committee come together for a special meeting to vote on a resolution towards making a recommendation to the city.
Before I second that, I just want to make sure that I think we should try to do this as soon as possible instead of waiting another month. So maybe set up a time that we're going to get together again on 2 weeks from now or something and just make that book happen. whoever's able to attend that vote, just get the majority done and do it. But just want to get this. But I would second that motion.
Heather, can you take vote, please? Roll.
Absolutely. Sabula,
Yeah.
Lyra,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Hess,
Yeah.
Geyer,
Yeah.
Yang,
Yes.
Lee.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you to our guests. This was
Can I
not
say
only in,
something?
yes,
In-
absolutely.
I was, I don't want to step in the way of my brother there, but when Menominees are grateful and they appreciate stuff that is happening on their behalf, and they want to thank you, they say Wawanan. I was hoping that my brother Dave would say a few words before in that regard to you guys. I really appreciate your support in this endeavor and look forward to meeting you in person. I sit on a humanities council and I'm zoomed out, and this platform here isn't any easier than Zoom. So I look forward to the day of meeting some of you folks in person. Wawanan.
Yeah, yes, I'd like to say too that it's been a long journey. It started, I don't know how many years ago, when we had the mayor up here on here at the museum, and some of the city representatives, and working with Pesquel and Arnold, and getting this, trying to get this through. And a meeting like this is really awesome. And it shows that the willingness of the city of Oshkosh to work with the Menominee people, the first people of Wisconsin, I'd like to say, indigenous people of this area, to correct something that and make something right. The history of our people and working together, I'm just so very happy, and I'd like to say, when I get in the moors, plus, that means thank you, and it was good working with you and with you in the future also. Oh.
Thank you all for your work.
Thank you. Because everyone is muted, I'll just speak on everyone's behalf. Thank you so much for not just this information, but for your presence tonight and for this lesson for all of us. And we are honored that we could be part of this important work. We're so honored. So thank you so much for your time and for all the work that you've put in prior to this meeting. And we thank you for this dialogue. We're so appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you to our committee. Knowing how long it took to get this on our agenda and knowing how long they have worked towards presenting this, I did not want to, cut the conversation short. So thank you to all for kind of going with the flow of this. But we will go ahead and move on. So Carmen would like to start a discussion on potential events and actions for our committee based on, yeah, Carmen, I'll let you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for putting this on the agenda and It will be brief. I think we all are sick to death of online platforms and meetings, and I was excited to see that the last agenda item is maybe meeting in person. And this stems, first of all, thank you to Michelle for calling. And we had a great and lengthy conversation to the point that I missed a meeting, but it was well worth it. And she called to say, what do you want your involvement to be on this committee after that first year that you've committed to? And I said, you know, if we keep doing that on Zoom, it's not very likely. I am zoomed out. It's not creative. It's not working for me. I've got a brain injury, too much screen time. And she was very receptive. And one of the things that we discussed was the action, because I think that each of us is here for a purpose. We all come from a background. We all have a gift. We all know what we think we can bring to the table. And we're all busy. We all know we don't have time to waste. So my recommendation, similar to when we struggled with that mission statement, and we collectively couldn't do anything because we just were stalled. But when we went back to our drawing board, those of us who did, wrote something, put our thoughts into words, put them all together, magic happened. And we didn't use any one person. We just added, even those who didn't take the time to write, we all came together and pretty quickly after that came up with a very good work mission statement, knowing that it's fluid, it may change. And so what I suggested to Michelle is that we might want to do that with action. And I've done this before on other committees like this, where instead of waiting to engage a professional, why don't we, each one of us, come up in writing with 3 or 5 different ideas of what we think we can bring to that table. What do we think diversity looks like, and what do we have to add? And Michelle was excited, I think, about some of the ideas that are out there. So I wanted to suggest that that might be another homework assignment that we do. Put that on the agenda. We can put it up on Google Docs, or Michelle can email it, and we can see where we each dovetail. But what I really like in this process is that each person who shares their 3 to 5 ideas say, I'm going to own this one. This is the one that's my most passionate, and this is what I can do, and I want to be that person who drives it. So that's it. That was that idea, and I guess we're open for discussion. There we go. Discussion?
Yeah. You know what we're working on some of these.
We're breaking up.
Overall plan. Some extra time. We kind of hang stuff while we're doing there.
I didn't understand a word. Is it just me on my end that it's broken?
No, I think that was Beth. Beth, do you want to try again? You were breaking up.
Is it still breaking up?
It's
Is it
better.
okay now? I was just gonna say that I like the idea of doing some actual actions while we're working on your plan, bigger formalities.
Yeah, and the suggestion in no way says we don't need a consultant. We invested a lot of time last week. The city takes, they come highly recommended, and it is nice having an overall umbrella. But I don't know that we want someone else to do our job. Because as I said, each of us has our own background, our own personality, our own gifts, and our mayor chose us for those gifts. So I think that we should get started. Because I think that this platform is so difficult to be creative, and that brainstorming and being engaged. It's really hard. So that's why I thought going back like we did last time and putting things in writing and then saying to who's going to take ownership. That doesn't mean it's written in concrete, obviously, but it's a way to start that brainstorming even before we're able to meet together in a building where we can say, hey, I see what you look like. I see who you are.
So if I could ask a question, Carmen,
Yes.
or of the group. So would you imagine something along the lines of, for example, if we took the city's 5 elements of the strategic plan and looked at it through the DEI lens, and possibly a action item brainstorming session that kind of came under one or multiple of those 5 elements. I guess I'm just trying to visualize what you're proposing. I think I hear you saying folks email things to Michelle, and some of us are a little more visual or kinesthetic, and it might be, sticky notes on a board if we were in person, which hopefully will happen very soon. But I'm just trying to understand or visualize that a little better.
And, just like when we went back and each one of us went to our desk and we typed a mission statement, not everybody did it. And that's okay because everybody got involved in that final process. And it may be you take a screenshot of a sticky note that you wrote. It's not a dissertation, it's bullet points, it's ideas. And we may find that, I'll give you the example that I said to Michelle, and this was something that we did, where I moved from. And it doesn't really matter the committee, but what we did was we went to the local newspaper. We were donated a column, so we didn't pay for it. And that column highlighted certain businesses. And what I did for that column, I took ownership, was I wrote the column each month. So let's say we're going to talk about minority businesses, and it's going to fall under that city umbrella. We're going to make sure we, cross our T's and dot our I's. Whether or not we have to pay for it as a committee or they donate it because they can see the value, now you're going to have people outside of our committee learning about minority businesses. They may be restaurants or dress shops or hairdressers or whatever. It doesn't cost anything except time, but it may make a huge difference. And there were a lot of ideas like that. Other people may want to do something in the schools or in healthcare or wherever their expertise is. But I just think that we are missing that brainstorming element through this platform. And this is just one way to start saying, what does this committee look like? The fact that we've been here a year, now we need to start looking at that action and how do each one of us bring our uniqueness to this committee and see what we can give to our city.
Carmen, I appreciate you saying that and bringing us back full circle to something I feel we kind of started with the interest and talent survey. And again, not everyone completes it. It's all good. We all work differently. But I would like to remind everyone, we did put that out there early on to capture our interests and our talents. I know I personally, several months back, recommended we all take a look at those 4 duties that are in our DEI guide that we fit in. I look at those as personally buckets. And to what your point is, Carmen, there's room for all of that in our 4 duties and responsibilities. So I'm all for this personally. What I would like to see us start doing, and being vice chair, I've got a long list of work lists that I'm not getting to, quite frankly, for this committee that I'm hoping to still put forward, and just to move us along, like some structure. Visual structure helps to so I say, look at our duties. If you've got an interest, just make sure it fits with one of those 4 buckets, please. And then we can start. I've got tracking sheets. I'm sure we all have tools we can use, but let's start tracking and put something on Google Docs, maybe a schedule, a calendar, but so we can track our community outreach. That is a huge thing that we're doing. We're supposed to facilitate input from all geographic areas of the city and all kinds of things. You talk about minority businesses. Excellent. Absolutely. I have that on my list of like interests and talents, like business development for minority communities. I've just looked at this talent survey since our last meeting. Like I put down a bucket of things that I know I have an interest in doing. So I thank you for bringing us back to this point. And I'm glad to hear that you and I hope others are feeling like, okay, we've been here enough and there's a need and an interest to start taking individual actions, because there's a room for that. And I believe we need to do that. But I don't know, Michelle, if there's a way, if the city already has tools to just sort of help organize independent communications and outreach or activities, or do we need to create something for ourselves, whatever. But I think that might be a good starting point. Like you said, start to find a way to capture what people want to do, what's coming up. I think that's all great, but I just ask that we put it within our 4 duties, like we make sure we bucketed this appropriately, just to keep us on the right track.
You're exactly right. And I'm sure that Michelle can send us an email and refresh it and maybe come up, as a group, as a structure, on where we go next. And I don't think I'm the only one who's frustrated at not having some more direction now that we have a mission statement.
Right. I mean, we can certainly put together, a document with the 4 buckets, in a place where people can put their ideas in there. I think when Carmen and I spoke, I'm sure every one of you has 20 or 30 great ideas, but then after we collect them, and maybe not 20 or 30, then you guys can go through and figure out what's important to you. What do you think, feasibly you can do, or what do you want to recommend to, the city manager or to council that the city should be taking on? Because I mean, I think that that's what the mayor has been saying. She wants you guys to also make recommendations to us with where you see gaps that we can work on, as well as some of the things that you can do within the community, because you all do have great talents and passions.
And I'll just add a little bit here that while council anticipated seeing some form of an action plan at the end of a year, which would be coming up in July, that doesn't mean that we can't, even if you did come up with, let's say, a list of things that couldn't go span multiple years. And certainly, some of us, going back to those talent surveys, really appreciated really thinking about our personal connection to this work. So thanks for bringing that forward, Carmen. And again, going back to the initial talent survey, really appreciate that reminder.
Something that I would like to add is that while it may seem like as a group, I don't know if other people are, Carmen, it sounds like maybe you feel frustrated that there haven't been more actions, that we individually occupy spaces, right? Whether it's in aging and disability, or in working with Indigenous groups, or the Hmong community, or we all occupy our own spaces. So maybe collectively we haven't moved forward, as much as we would like. But I want to just recognize that we all, as individuals, are doing this work on a daily basis. And for me, sometimes it's just taking care of my children. I'm not to reduce it to that, but that is being, inclusive and, self-care towards children of a minority, a marginalized community. So in all of our work, I want to encourage us that we are doing this work, whether we're sharing it out as a group or not. We are doing the work. So let's remember that and feel encouraged by that, that you are all doing it. We're all doing
Well,
it daily.
and
Yeah.
I do thank you for that reminder, and that is why we're all here. And maybe I think my frustration is more with this online platform. It just doesn't work for me. So how can we make it work for more of us while we have to do this? And when I saw the process that we went through on brainstorming on the mission statement, how different people sending in kind of jump started it. I feel like that I can see that happening in other ways, making that platform. I got off the call last month and I said to my husband, I feel encouraged. I feel encouraged. I feel there's some great conversation. I was so ready. You don't know how ready to call Lori and say, I'm done. Can't do this anymore. And so I think I was missing that. I know I'm not the only person. So what can we do as long as we're stuck in Zoom land or what do you want to call it to make the best of it and we all shine in our own ways and feel like we have a voice? Because I wasn't feeling that until last time. And it really encouraged me that we came together collectively because like you say, each of us is in our space doing our thing, but together as a group in this committee, we can be so much stronger. And it doesn't mean we abandon what we're each doing solitarily, but we together, and that was my goal. And so again, thank you, Michelle, for that long conversation. And that was also very encouraging.
I just want to say that I think each of us is individual doing something for the community is what drives us to be here. Because we've been doing that for quite a while. And I think, and I don't know, maybe it's just me hearing myself talking, saying that I haven't seen any movement in years, even though I'm doing this individually. And I think people feel the same way from other directions. So I think this is the one avenue where we can do this something as a group because there's strength in numbers. And I think we have to focus on that. So I do appreciate, the retooling the direction because me too, I was frustrated as to where we were going. The last meeting made me feel a little better, and I decided to keep committed to this for a while. So I want to do this, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I may, Joaquin, I struggle with it too. I think we all do in our own ways. And I love this term Zoomland. If anyone's used it before or whatever, I'm just out of the loop, I guess, but I love it because it is some other space, man. Like, holy cow. Mayor, I would like to ask you, because the last strategic plan I've seen published online for the city was 2019-2020. Now, it sounds as if you might be referencing something more contemporary with that, or are you referencing that 2019-2020 strategic plan? Because I would absolutely love for us to be reviewing it in its current iteration or as it's being developed, because it seems that was a part of our charge, not to be reactive to what's already produced, but to be responsive to things as they're developing. Personally, that's an area of frustration. I feel that we are not included in the development or the activities of the city of Oshkosh writ large. But yet we're supposed to be advising, when I read our charge, on all kinds of these areas, but it's being developed out here and we're over in this little bubble.
Yes. Good question, Ashley. Absolutely. So I'm going to ask Michelle or John if this committee could receive the most current strategic plan via email. And if we don't have that current one that goes through 2022 out on our website, then we need to get that corrected as quickly as possible. Sometimes things get buried in web pages within web pages and are not as easily found. So that's good feedback. And I think the exciting thing is that while the current strategic plan goes through 2022, there will be a revision and update, correct, Mr. Fitzpatrick, in early 2022, which perhaps once you're able to see what is in the current iteration, by that point in time, there may be some desire for this committee to offer some additional elements into that or revisions.
All correct.
Right, I can certainly get out the most recent version. You know, I was personally out on the dashboard today because we updated our guiding principles to add inclusive as our newest ninth guiding principle. And I know that's out there. Again, I was just looking at them today, but I'm not sure if everything from the 2021, 2022 has been published yet, John. I don't know if you've been watching if we have all of our updates out there on that end, but I do know obviously some of our 2021, 2022 is out there because our new guiding principle has been added.
So Michelle, I just want to be real direct and say, I know it's out there. If we can get a direct link for folks in this group,
yep,
that would be, really helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. Regardless, I will email the latest plan, but I think most of it is out there. But regardless, I'll get it to you.
In terms of planning, what do you think about creating like a master list with those 4 domains? And then, I'm just visualizing a table. So a table with like the 4 domains, and then under there, we just kind of list some ideas just as a starter. Carmen, does that sound like that might be a good place to get started? Mm-hmm.
It does.
Okay.
I would suggest, which is what I said to Michelle, if we get 3 to 5 each or something, because when it gets beyond that, it's so cumbersome. And so I like, not that it sounds like it tonight, but I like brevity in terms of ideas, because you can't work on them all. And I think it would be interesting to see what kind of overlap there would be, and I think we're gonna find out a lot by that.
Sounds good. I can take care of that and send that out to the group.
And thank you for putting that on the agenda. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm here for 1 more month.
Is there anything else anyone would like to add to that, or I can move on? Yes, Lydia.
I don't know if I have the ability to make motions or not, but I think that something that would be incredibly important right now would be to send a recommendation to the city council to apologize for the history of Oshkosh's being a sundown town. Sundown towns were not only persecuting Black people, but also other people of color, specifically Native Americans. And I think this would give more credibility towards the actions that are happening now than specifically just the actions that the previous mayor instigated on this whole situation. So not only does it help, bring about that, we're taking the step forward and apologizing for the history that, pushed colored people away from our city. And I think that's important to address. And I think that it would go hand in hand with tandem with bringing in these new plaques, and we can then use that as momentum to continue down the road. So I think that Carmen's idea is really good for, coming up with ideas, but I also think, we want to start with some of these like small things. If we get like what I mentioned is mostly symbolic in nature, but that progresses through with now we're taking action and getting these plaques going. We're trying to get the city to fund some of it, maybe half of it. And then we're continuing down the road of making consistent actions.
Thank you,
I
Lydia.
don't usually have a lot to say, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Absolutely. I think that would, fall under something that we need to think about and discuss. I could add, an area on the Google Doc where, we can write down other action items that we feel that as a committee that we can, look at. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the discussion on a transition to in-person meetings and future public participation. So Michelle, did you want to lead the conversation on that?
Yes, the council did vote to go back to in-person meetings, I believe in the latter part of May, but also decided to allow the commissions, boards, etc., to decide on their own transition plan back into person meetings rather than, I guess, make that decision for all of the boards, commissions, and committees. So my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong on the date, after May 17th, is it, Mayor? We are allowed to go back to in-person. I think our scheduled meeting in May is after the date, if I recall. That we could, on our next scheduled meeting, back or go to in-person because we've never been in in-person meetings. Of course, if we do that, we will make sure we have a large room so we can all social distance. We still do require masks within our public areas. So we would have to mask, we would have to social distance and, follow those protocols. But we as a committee can resume in-person meetings in the latter part of May and of course going forward. So something for you guys to decide or discuss or think about what you might want that transition to look like.
My apologies, Michelle. Is it the 17th or the 24th of May that we meet next?
Our meeting's the 24th, but I think it was any meetings after like May 17th or something. And our meeting is the 24th.
So it would be appropriate then for somebody here on this committee, if they wanted to make a motion for that purpose. And I believe this was in combination with allowing public comment. Perhaps somebody wanted to divide that issue if they wanted to separate it out.
Well, as the biggest whiner about hating Zoom land, I can tell you that until we can meet without a mask, I guess I'm in Zoom land because I won't be able to. I can't wear a mask more than 15 minutes, just claustrophobia thing. I don't go anywhere. So if it's going to be mask, I do suggest that we still have a Zoom platform for those who need to do that because sadly I will not be there with the mask. So just might want to add that into the discussion.
Could we do a hybrid or a combination? Those who can
Yeah.
in person, and those who can or wish not to can do a Zoom?
Yeah, that's what we do with our Rotary. We started back in May. And so we've had in-person ever since then, along with the Zoom platform. Whether or not it's because of masking or because you can't, you can't get time off work or whatever. So that does work well for that one. I'm sure would work for this one too.
Well, just so everyone is aware, tomorrow night at the council meeting, there is an agenda item about currently our city mask ordinance is due to expire on April 30th, unless it is extended. So tomorrow night, that discussion will take place at council level as to whether or not they will go another 30 days or if it will be extended.
I guess the other thing I'd just like to mention, sorry. I just would like to mention that my understanding is that it has to be either all in person or all online because the hybrids from a structure standpoint have not worked well with our technology and I'm sure there were other reasons as well. So my understanding was we have to decide either we're going to go in person or stay virtual at this time. Again, as the mayor just said, things can be changing with the mask ordinance in the near future as well. So that might be a consideration for deciding to wait a little longer before you want to go in person, or, you know, again, Carmen just shared her thoughts, so.
First meeting we had, went well.
Yeah, I seem to recall we started hybrid. Our very first meetings, there were some people meeting in person in a large space at the city and the rest are online. So unless something's changed and we've gone back in our 21st century technologies at the city side, I'm really hard pressed to understand why it's an all or none venture. I think
But
that doesn't really fit the realities, but if you can really express to me what is the technological breakdown, I think our city's got more challenges than I realized.
But we weren't.
I remember those.
Does it have to do with the filming? Because prior, when we were talking about those first couple of meetings, it wasn't for public consumption yet. And then we went so that everybody would have the record. And correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, is that one of the problems is capturing those comments from the people online and also the people in person? Is it something to do with that, maybe?
I believe broadcasting does play into it. You know, and I do know that the council meetings, when they were hybrid, there were a lot of challenges. The people who are remote, oftentimes they can't hear well, because then we'll be in a big room and it's just really hard to hear what's going on. I can tell you it has not worked well for the city in the instances they have done it. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that area. But, you know, being part of the group, especially if you're doing brainstorming in a room together and you're online, it's very challenging to be on the outside and not being able to hear what's going on, or when you're breaking up and they can't hear you.
I remember we had real difficulties when we were doing the hybrid, particularly for those who showed up in person and you're in this one room with one microphone. It's echoey. You couldn't really understand or comprehend what was being said. We can all understand because we all have our own microphones. The communication was definitely, it wasn't good. You know, it was degraded.
Yes, I think maybe I feel the need to make a motion, but I'm not going to do so. But quite honestly, I think the city, we really need to find a proper, appropriate facility to bring, you know, into, like, seriously? I mean, I get it, but this is really, I'm a little shocked to hear that where there's some resistance, got to be an all or none thing. I mean, that's just really kind of causing me some significant dissonance here. But I'm just going to stop and I'm going to sit with this for a bit. So thank you.
I certainly understand everyone's frustration. I mean, I think ultimately we all would like to be in the same room together, and I think that will do wonders for this group. But I mean, the parameters I was given was in person or online at this time. So.
Now.
We didn't catch all of that.
We can.
Sorry.
I think I heard Beth make the motion to remain online at this time. Is that what everyone else heard?
And I think this is kind of illustrating some of the challenges. We don't all necessarily have access to the same strength of signal, and sometimes the audio can be cut out. I know that's happened to me on occasion until I hardwired in, and I can't even tell when I'm not being heard. So I believe that, from what I understand, to address Ashley's question, our IT department had advised council that as we are deciding either through council or boards and commissions, that the preference was, again, for broadcast purposes, but with the hybrid, this inequality in terms of maybe audio and some of the acoustical challenges in when you have a group in a room and the othering occurs with those who are online. And of course, each individual, maybe has a different perception of that. But that's what we were advised from the IT department, that in order for them to accommodate us through this WebEx platform, that if we go with one, it's preferred for that to be either all in person or all online for some equity issues.
I think we have the motion from Beth at this point. If I did not hear a second, if there was one.
Can I just ask if we were to go in person with that? I mean, Carmen, you had already expressed your concerns. Is there anyone else who would not be able to do in person? Or I'm kind of, I guess I didn't state either way just because I'm flexible. I can be flexible and go either way. And so I don't have a strong opinion whether it's in person or Zoom. And we can certainly, say the next meeting we'll do online, and then we can discuss it again for the June meeting if we'd like. But
Just to offer another thought for the group, this is John. I think you indicated that you might be having a special meeting before the next meeting. And if you are, at that point, you'll know what the council members have decided in regard to masks, and you could place this item on the agenda again. Might make your decision a little bit easier, just as an alternate option for you.
Yeah, for me, it's gonna be really hard to do in person at this time with two little kids and my wife's schedule. So a hybrid for me would probably be a better option, or online. In person would just be kind of hard right now.
Why don't I just say that, can we go for a couple more meetings and then maybe we can review the situation again to see if everyone is comfortable enough to meet in person?
I really like John's idea, since we're going to have a special meeting, and adding now 2 agenda items, because if the city is voting tomorrow on if they're going to continue that mask mandate, that really will change a lot if they don't continue it. That gives us more of a frame of reference of reality. So I think what we need to do is to come up with that meeting date for that special meeting where we move forward with what we discussed tonight. We can add that secondary agenda, because by that time we'll know a little bit more direction of what the city is doing. And I mean, obviously there are always the possibility that someone won't make a meeting, and I just know I won't, and that's fine. We all have our comfort level during this pandemic and beyond. So,
And if I could just remind folks that there is a motion on the floor by Beth Roberts to remain online at this time. And so we kind of jumped into discussion without a second, but just a point of procedure there.
I think if I second or Beth's motion about staying online for a little bit longer. I'm not sure how you define a little bit longer, but for the meantime.
Continue online at this time, I believe was basically Beth's motion.
I have a motion to say that we stay online through May and then revisit.
Any questions or any points of discussion before we take a vote?
I think
Okay,
we need a
Heather?
second on an amended motion, correct?
I'm sorry?
Beth just amended her motion. So I don't know if we have a second on that.
I second Beth's amended motion.
Thank you.
Discussion? Heather, can you take roll, please?
Absolutely. Sabula,
Yeah.
Lyra,
Yeah.
Robinson,
Yes.
Roberts, Roberts,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Yes.
Hess,
Yeah.
Geyer,
Yeah.
Yang,
Yes.
and Lee.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you. The next agenda item is to talk about our next steps with Raquel Salone of FEI.
Yeah.
Wait, one moment, Angie. There was another item in that agenda regarding public comment.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so we also need to discuss as a committee what we'd like to do about public participation, public comments. Michelle, do you want to give us a little bit of background information?
Sure. I believe it was at the August meeting, you decided at that time that you would not have public participation at this time. So it has not been revisited since then. Obviously, public participation can look a lot of different ways. You've been inviting speakers, which is different than public being able to participate either on agenda items where they can share their thoughts or opinions, or if they can basically ask to be put on the agenda. So there's different levels of what you can allow for citizen participation in your meetings. I don't know if John or the mayor have any thoughts on, obviously the mayor being on council at this time, they have decided all public comment is at the beginning of the meeting because that works best in this environment for them. Mayor, is it only on agenda items or can they speak of anything?
No, so we have two opportunities for public comments. The first one is regarding general comments that are not, I could have the order wrong, but one of them is public comments unrelated to agenda items. And the second one is public comment for items that are on the agenda. So this group could choose either or both or none.
Thank you.
And I will just let the committee know that there was a request last week to speak to this committee, and I inadvertently told them wrong information that I thought that we had already voted on this earlier, and I was mistaken. And so there was an individual who had an interest in speaking to the committee on an item that is kind of waiting to see what you guys vote on before they move forward.
I think in the spirit of creating spaces to have these types of dialogues that we do both.
I agree. I think that for to have validity with the community, we have to get their input and let them have a voice aside from what we interpret it to be.
So was that a motion, Tim?
It was just to facilitate discussion, or I mean, yeah, I'm interested to hear what other people have to say.
Can I ask a logistical question? So how much time do you allow for the general comments and for unrelated agenda items? And then how much time do you allow for comments on agenda items?
So I believe it's 5 minutes for general, and John Fitzpatrick, you might have to help me out with this. I can't remember. I should know this. I believe it's 5 minutes on general. And is it 3 minutes on agenda items, or is it 5 also? I can't remember.
I can't remember either, but one thing I can say that it's really up to the group then, whatever parameter you decide, let's just say you decide 5 for both. If the speaker requests additional time, the group can decide to extend that time. In other words, if I'm the speaker and I'm right in the middle of my concept I'm trying to share with your committee, and then I could say, Chairperson Lee, could I please have another minute or two to finish my thought? And then she could put it to the group and say, how does the group feel about that? Are we willing to extend another minute or two? And then you can say yes or no. So it's good to have those parameters, though. Just speaking from experience, and the mayor can weigh in on that also, but you can always extend more.
I got a question about the public comment. Are they going to be almost like the ones we see at the city council, where invited guests are able to speak, but there's no feedback, there's no dialogue? Or are they going to be different in a way that we are going to be able to respond and have a discussion?
It's a good question, Moshe. So I'm just going to read you on our citizen statements to council. These are the general.
Okay.
Citizens are to address the council only. Statements are limited to 5 minutes and must address items not listed on the council meeting agenda. Are limited to issues that have an impact on the city of Oshkosh and the common council may address at a future meeting, and must not include endorsements of any candidates or other electioneering. And the reason why you don't hear council respond back on those citizens is because it has not been publicly noticed as an item of debate. So that's my understanding as to why you see folks relating their comments. However, if people are speaking on a specific agenda item, again, those comments can go one way addressed to the council, but then the council takes it up for discussion after those comments. So I know that's a little bit confusing unless John or Michelle have better explanations. That's my understanding.
No, I think the mayor explained it very well. I think there's a couple things to consider. Number one, if somebody has something that they want to speak to, and your group is going to get involved in an intense discussion about it, just to further elaborate on the mayor's point, you may have citizens that say, hey, I was really upset that you got into this long discussion because I would have liked to have participated. And if I knew you were going to be talking about that, in other words, put it on the agenda, and then I would have liked to have participated. But because you didn't provide me that opportunity of knowledge, I was eliminated from that discussion. So that's part of it. And the second thing I would say is, if you have several guests or other things on your agenda, and you get into a long discussion or debate that could get quite heated, it's going to also take away from the time that you have scheduled for those other people, or make them wait, or make those other guests wait, or extend your meeting beyond what you might think. So those are some thoughts for consideration.
Well, my concern is maybe, yeah, my concern over that, by not having this discussion with those guests, sometimes they leave volume. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. The reason why I was asking basically is sometimes citizens feel like leaders do not listen because there's no right away feedback at that moment. And if we're going to invite people to come and talk to us or to ask questions on an agenda item, I feel like we owe an explanation to them right away, and like them walk away and we sit back and discuss and then give that information later on. I see maybe that's a frustration that I've always had with this kind of rules, whether it's at the city level or at the district. I get an opportunity to talk, but I never hear from them. Years might pass. So that's the reason why I was specifically asking in this particular situation.
Yes, it is very awkward and cumbersome. And it perhaps, I think what I hear you saying is that there's no comment directly back to that individual, and that perhaps maybe this may be something I just should check on procedurally, that I could at least engage the staff to ask if that could be followed up on at a future meeting or via correspondence. Is that done? That's been done in the past, right, John?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
I have a question. So the only thing that we have discretion is on the time parameters, but not actually the process of that. Is that my understanding then?
Another way that you could do it, Joaquin, is if someone brings up a subject and they make their point, and then you have other people that are waiting to speak also. You could, as the mayor said, you could have discussion on that point. If it's a point on the agenda, you can have discussion about that, and then you could bring, if oftentimes the council will say, you know, so and so is here for this agenda item, and they've asked that person to speak on that agenda. They've asked that person to come back up and speak on it. That's kind of in the context of different agenda items. The only complicating factor, and I'm sorry to make this so complicated because I understand your point, in this format that we have right now in Zoom land or WebEx land, all the comments are at the beginning of the meeting. So it makes it very difficult, even more difficult, to re-engage that person later on, like I've seen council members do in the past. So I know that might not be the right explanation or the one you'd like to hear, but it can be done, but it's even more complex now with these remote situations.
Given that, do we want to delay public comment until we are no longer doing this format?
The other thing, and if you choose not to do public comment, obviously, my intent was to let you know about the person who would like to speak. You can put them on the agenda as a speaker and notice it the way we notice everything else when people do come to us, because I believe that's how the Oshkosh monument got on the agenda, was by that group coming forward and asking to be on our agenda.
I think that's a very good point by Michelle, and that is a way for you to still address. I know that Michelle mentioned to me about the person that approached the mayor about speaking. You certainly could ask that person to attend as a presenter, and then, you know, that way you'll give that it's noticed, it's on the agenda. If people are interested in listening in or tuning in, they can do that, and then you can allocate a certain amount of time for that person, and you can engage that person in dialogue too. So that's another maybe stopgap option for you.
I will share that since we are speaking specifically about this topic, that there was another opportunity presented to this individual to speak to council, because we do allow public comments. and there is a mechanism. However, when it was learned that you have to provide your address, this was a sensitive topic, and they are now choosing not to do that because they did not want to divulge their address. Which
So
is
yeah.
required, which is required for public comment at the council for the clerk to record. And I don't know if that's a statutory requirement, but it's been, John, how long has it been that the address has been required when a speaker comes to speak to council?
As long as I can remember, and unfortunately, I'm getting pretty old now. But we certainly can check on that, whether it's statutorily required. If you haven't already inquired with the city attorney, Mayor Palmieri.
I would just like to say that I think, I understand the mechanics or the thought behind controlling some of those comments, because I can imagine you can go on forever, people bantering back and forth. But I also know that a lot of people will not get involved because of barriers. And we might see them as insignificant, but to them, they might be large barriers in terms of trying to communicate. And I think we're supposed to be a voice for the underheard in the community. So I want to make sure that we have an open venue for them. And I know there's procedures that we have to follow, but I agree. I think that if someone is making a comment, there should be some kind of mechanism so that we can have a conversation back to them as to what we decided. And if they have a counter argument, they can bring that back, But to say, well, you got to go to the next meeting, and the next meeting, and the next meeting, they might not have time. They might have kids. They might have a million things that prevents them from that. So I'm just trying to figure out, can we think of some kind of mechanism that makes this a little easier for people to do that? And I don't know what they would look like.
Well, we are supposed to be inclusive, aren't we? That's the first thing. We're supposed to be inclusive. And my observation is people are not comfortable in certain spaces, just like Joaquin has said. And often we hear people say they don't trust their government because of this not having access. So if we are going to stick around, if we're going to get stuck with the same rules that we are currently working on, that has been used before, it means we are going to continue the same path. We need to create a different space, a different avenue where people should be able to comfortably talk to us and hear from us. And what I hear when I'm on the street is they ask me, what is our committee doing? Because we have not given them that opportunity to talk to us, And that's why I was asking, like, okay, maybe if we have that public comment, they would come in and ask us questions, and then as a group, we could talk to them. But if we're just gonna get them come in, they will talk and walk away, it will be the same old thing that they are tired of. I just wanted to let you guys, that's how I see it, that's how they feel in the community somehow.
So here's something to, I guess, keep in mind, as I understand it from the city attorney and sitting through a number of public meetings, laws, instructions. Anyone can come and talk with one or two of you individually, and through phone call, email, etc. But because of the public meetings laws, the public notice, and that's what John Fitzpatrick was talking about earlier, has to be stated if it's an agenda item or it's an item that is going to be debatable. And I mean, short of changing that law, I don't know how to respond to that, but what I hear you saying though is, because we want to be more inclusive, it may mean making yourself more available, outside the meeting, and then bringing that to the group as an agenda item to discuss, not to exclude anyone from participation, but again, I acknowledge how awkward it is. Yes.
And I agree. I think, just to take Mayor Palmieri's ideas a little bit further too, you could explore, as the group feels more comfortable, you can explore different types of meetings with the public too. You might want to have a town hall meeting where the group specifically notices it and says, we'd like your ideas and feedback on this specific topic or these specific topics. And then you invite the public, and then they can speak freely on a variety of topics, and you can comment back as you're indicating. The reason that the structured meetings are set up the way that they are, and I don't mean to bore you with the mechanics of this, but they're set up really for good reason. So someone can't, outside the eye of the public, just start talking about things and make a decision without the public knowing about it. And then the public says, hey, wait a minute, I never knew you were going to talk about this. And now not only did you talk about it, but you made all kinds of decisions about it. And you didn't even tell us. So I understand everything you're trying to say is with good intent. But those laws were really put in place to try to protect the public and prevent those who don't have good intent from taking an idea from concept to action and cutting the public out of it. So that's really the purpose of it. But I think there are other alternatives that you might be able to consider.
And I would just share too that, when we do listening sessions or a town hall and there's not those specific agenda items, it is a public meeting and anyone can attend. You may also have folks with, what do I want to say, John? It can get rather chaotic.
Yeah, that's true. But I think, as you've indicated, as this group has indicated, they want to know, and you want to be open, and you want to hear, and sometimes it kind of comes with the territory. But when and if you're ready to do that, that's another matter. You can control it to a certain degree too. Still put parameters on it. You could say a person can speak for X amount of time, and then we're going to respond for X amount of time, and then we're going to go on to the next person to give them an opportunity to speak, because you don't want to have one person just dominate the discussion, and there's 20 or 30 or 100 people there and they never get a chance to say anything. So I think you could put some structure to it if you wanted to.
I think we're going to have to make a decision. I want to be mindful of our time. And so is anyone ready to make a motion? Just something I was thinking was that if
a motion for public comment.
Moshe, is that public comment for both items related to the agenda and then also unrelated to the agenda? So two
Yes,
different
both.
sessions
Yes.
at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion on the table is to allow for public comments for both unrelated and agenda items beginning at our next meeting.
I second it.
Could we put a time limit on that motion as well? Maybe 5 minutes with the ability to extend that, or do we just leave it open?
We definitely need a time limit.
Do we need to amend the motion?
We should put a time
Wait,
limit, right?
Isn't this the discussion phase?
Correct.
Don't we have a discussion phase?
Mhm.
Yes, there
There's
is
not a
a motion and a second. You can certainly have discussion.
I'm just curious as to how we would manage the list of people waiting to talk. It's a lot easier in person. How would we do that in Zoom land? Like, who's next?
The
How would
way
that
that
be
you
managed?
do it in online, and this kind of goes back to some of the dialogue about hybrids, in person, not person. You usually have somebody who's the technical manager manage those people who have indicated in advance that they'd like to speak. So they register to speak, and then the technical manager keeps track of those people, whether or not they're in the meeting, they've entered the meeting, and then lets the chairperson aware, makes the chairperson aware of the people that are registered to speak. And if they've registered to speak on a specific topic, they keep track of that. And then they also, let the chairperson know, and then that chairperson at the appropriate time asks them to speak. So it's managed. It's pretty complex in this world in the virtual world. And it really needs to be all at the beginning of the meeting, unfortunately, in the virtual world, just to manage it. But that's just a little bit about how that would work.
And John, who would manage that for our committee?
Right now, we have a person in HR who manages the technical components of the meeting. Depending upon how many people would like to speak for your group, we may expand that and have an information technology person manage that. If we're going to have many people speak, it depends really on the topics. But I could see your group, because there's a lot of issues that are very personal, and also could be touching a lot of people, or we could have a lot of people who wish to speak. So I think we just have to monitor it and make sure we support you appropriately.
It just seems like with some of the sound issues and technology that it might be wise to wait until June when we're potentially in person. I'm afraid that if someone comes forth and tries to speak and it just doesn't go well for whatever reason, that we're going to lose that voice.
I don't mean to sway you either way, and I didn't weigh in when you were talking about the structures of the meetings earlier, but there are a variety of issues that come into play, as we talked about, the quality of the individual's internet that we don't control. If they can't be heard, they're often frustrated. The people that are watching are often frustrated. And if you have 50 people that want to speak and it isn't working, people get angry, and it's not a good scene. So it can be complex, but we're prepared to do whatever you wish.
I just want to add that council also allows, and this committee could do the same, by phone only. So for those who don't have an internet connection, it is accessible without the internet. There's an actual dial phone number that one can call in. As a matter of fact, it appears that we have somebody who's attending this meeting through a phone number on the screen here now. So there is a broader level of accessibility, recognizing not everybody has, but it's up to that individual to determine the quality of their internet connection, or if they even have it available. So just to muddy the waters a little more, that is yet another layer of access, is via phone specifically.
I don't want to be difficult, but I'm the one on the phone right now because I have never had a problem with my internet ever. And today was clearly a problem with me trying to speak. So you've got a person who thinks they have good internet access. They try and go on like I did earlier, and it didn't work. So again, I'll stop.
I just want to say that I think we are all these things make it inaccessible. We're already not meeting in person, and no matter what anybody says, those meetings in person give more access to the community, to us, versus internet. We're already not going to do that for a while because we got to postpone it, and now we're going to do postpone this part. And I think, and maybe nobody will call, but the point is that we have to give them the option. And if the internet doesn't work, maybe a phone call would work, or I don't care if it's an email. Just thinking that we can continue to put this off until we have a perfect committee, and then we can open the doors and see what happens. But I just want to make sure that, you know, the committee has access to us, and the community has access to us. And I guess that's.
I also think if for some reason we decide not to do this, we need to make it known, better known, I guess, how people can access each one of us individually for us to be able to share information, as well as the option of getting on the agenda. So, and if we decide for whatever reason not to do public comment until we're in person, those other means of letting people have a voice that John mentioned should be more publicized.
Point of clarification, Michelle, do the individual committee members have a link to their email currently on the website?
Yes, they do. Yes, on the website, there's a link to the emails. So individuals certainly can go through that route to access any of you via email. So please watch your emails. And if you're not sure which email is published, feel free to look and let me know if you need that updated.
Are we ready to take a vote? Heather,
Yes.
will you take roll?
Sabula,
Yes.
Lyra,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Roberts,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
Hess.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt the roll call, but I believe that the person who made the motion was to continue online through the end of May. Is that what everybody understands they're voting on?
No.
No, we voted on that. It's to allow both public comment on agenda items and not on non-agenda items beginning at the next meeting.
Yes.
My apologies.
Hess,
Yes.
Geyer,
Yes.
Yang,
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
8 ayes, 1 nay.
Okay. Our next agenda item is to talk about next steps with our with FEI with as our facilitator. Before we open that up, I would like to say that our meeting has been over 2 hours at this point, and so I would like to suggest that perhaps we table this agenda item to the next meeting, but I will leave that up to the group.
I'll make a motion to table it to next meeting.
I was gonna say that. I second that.
Anyone want to add anything to that discussion? Okay, Heather?
Yes. Sabula,
Aye.
Lyra,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Roberts,
Aye.
Smith,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Geyer,
Yes.
Yang,
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
I would just like to mention you guys did not indicate any time limits for the comment sessions in your vote. I don't know if that is something you want to clarify.
I think we should.
Do we have to issue a motion with the time limits? Or can we just
I
make
will
it
make the
what to add?
Michelle, can you clarify?
So, yeah, if you would like to make a motion on a time limit for those comments.
I'll make a motion to make them 5 minutes each with the ability to extend them if there's a need.
I second the motion.
Discussion? Heather?
Yes. Sabula,
Yes.
Lyra,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Roberts,
Aye.
Smith,
Yes.
Hess,
Yay.
Geyer,
Yes.
Yang,
Yes.
Lee.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Okay, and then the last.
Angie,
Yes.
Can I have 1 minute on the agenda before we wrap up?
Yes.
Oh, I thought I would have it by now, but I didn't get it today, and I will hopefully email it to Michelle either tomorrow or Wednesday about a public viewing of an interview with the author from Waking Up White with a radio announcer, and then a open dialogue guided discussion after that, and it's going to be on May 20th at 3 o'clock. So I'll send you guys out the flyers, but I want everyone to know about it and to try and promote it. Again, May 20th at 3 o'clock, and I will get the flyer to Michelle to distribute. Thank you.
And if I can add another announcement, May 5th, a vigil will be taking place downtown by the bridge as the lights are turned red for murdered and missing Indigenous women. That's hosted by a coalition of organizations. If anyone would like to attend, I believe they'll be putting out a press release shortly. The time would be, approximately sunset around 8 p.m. or so. So I just wanted to share that. I'll be making the proclamation tomorrow evening at the council regarding again, the murdered and missing Indigenous women. And then finally, as you know, the council liaison for this meeting, for this committee is 1 year. My year will be up at the end of May. And there has been an interest by another council member in being your liaison. We'll be having that discussion again tomorrow evening as well. So I just wanted to share that with you. And if anybody whose term is expiring this year, who's on the committee, chooses to not request reappointment, please let me know. But I just wanted to share that with you. So.
Thank you, Mary Palmieri, for your contributions to our committee. And we were honored to have you as part of our group. And you have given us so much. You've imparted a lot of wisdom and experience. So we appreciate your participation. Are there other agenda items that we would like to discuss at this moment? Okay, then I will, I have brain fog. Can I go ahead and adjourn this meeting, or do I have to make a motion? I just kind of forgot it's late now. I can adjourn?
We
Make a
should motion.
Okay, make a motion.
Roll call.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Second it.
Everyone in favor? Everyone in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tonight. See you at next week's or next month's meeting virtually. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.